Wake up the innocent, sweet tasting candy for the kids. Hide it from each other, don't let them see the sugar dripping from your lips. Keep it secret, a bad dream shining from your memories. Shining from your memories. I'm not trying to get caught red-handed. I'm not trying to get caught red-handed. If I could change your mind, maybe another day would make it right. If I was on your side, I'd find another way to draw the line. If I could change your mind, if I was on your side, tripping over outlaws, your bare feet blooding up the trail. The Lord provides. The Lord provides. The Lord provides. The Lord provides. Death won't take me now. Send your spirit down. I seek but you're not found. Are you silent or am I just deaf? Where are you now? Are you even listening to me now? Brokenness and chaos all around. Where are you? Where are you now? Are you even listening to me now? Brokenness and chaos all around.
Pentecostal in the back, got out the anointing oils, and we're back up. So we're good to go. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers, particularly Jill. Happy Mother's Day. But all the mothers out there, I know this stay-at-home stuff probably means you're all working overtime. Thank you so much for all that you guys do. We are praying for you. Speaking of praying, please leave your prayers in the comments on Facebook. If it's something more personal, I understand maybe you don't want to put that up there. Reach out to us. I also want to mention we have a live.actionchurch.com website set up where you can actually add prayer requests and comments as you go along. And that's going to be our future home of Action Church live streaming. So go ahead and jump on there. And as always, I want to encourage you to invite, invest, and get involved. Inviting is easier than it's ever been before. It's as simple as sharing the stream on Facebook or grabbing the link and putting it up on your Twitter, whatever it is, and saying, hey, I'm going to church this morning. You're all invited. Invest your money, time, I get it. We can't meet right here, right now, but there is going to come a time, and very soon, where it's going to be all hands on deck to get Action Church up and going again. So, start stretching, whatever you got to do to get ready at home, because that day is coming. And we're gonna sound the horn, and you're gonna come running over the hills. Speaking of sounding horns, this morning we're talking about Gideon, and I'm going to turn it over to Don.
Hey, good morning. I was thinking, remember when we used to go to ball games? And remember that thing called the national anthem that would come on? And I don't know about you, but I've sort of had mixed emotions about the national anthem, kind of depended on who was singing. Some people do a great job. Others, Shaka Khan, not so much, or Aerosmith, Steven Tyler, even though I love you, God, stop it. And I think sort of the national anthem always goes bad the moment the singer says, I'm just going to make it my own. No, stop making it your own. But I was thinking about this one line. In fact, this one line is sort of the line I had in my head when I came up with this series about Gideon. And we have a better title. Mitch came up with You and What Army, which I think is a much better title. But this idea was in my head because I was thinking about the story of the Star-Spangled Banner, of Francis Scott Key on a boat. We actually went a couple years ago with some friends that have a boat there on Baltimore's Inner Harbor, and we're setting sort of out from Fort McHenry, looking in, thinking like, this is probably about where, Francis was setting. He was, if you don't know the story, he was captured and put on a British ship. He actually went out there of his free will to help a friend, but he was a lawyer, and he was held on the British ship because what he didn't know is he sort of went out there at the worst possible time, just in time to see a bombardment of Fort McHenry by the British forces in the War of 1812. This was a little later in 1813. But he got to sort of watch through the night, and what he was waiting for was, will the American flag be flying in the morning, or will it be the British flag? Will we be back under British rule, or will we still be, United States of America? And that's where that song came from. But this one line, I've always thought of it as just the ending, right? It's just the ending of the Star-Spangled Banner. And it's where all the singers, they go, I got to show you my high note. And they're like, land of the free. My soprano was strong this morning. But you have like that one line where they go up, and then you end on the home of the brave. And if it's a good singer, they sing one note there. If it's an annoying singer, they sing about 1,500 notes on the brave part. But I was thinking about this as I thought of Gideon, because it's not just sort of two descriptors of America. What Francis Scott Key was saying, and what is true, is that in order to be free, you also have to be at least a little brave, right? Like, in order to be free, he was like, the people in Fort McHenry are going to have to be brave to withstand this if we're going to remain free. And it's the story of Gideon, and it's the story of our personal lives. Like, in order to be brave, you're going to have to be free, or in order to be free, you're going to have to be brave at some point. And so I keep sort of thinking about those two words, like what it is in our world today to go, if we're going to be free, we're going to have to be brave, because guess what, gang? I don't know if you can switch this for me, but there are murder hornets out there. Have you heard? Like, if we go outside, oh yeah, I'm glad that's giant out there, and I'm back off. Sorry, Mitch. But there are murder hornets out there waiting for us when we finally go outdoors, and so we're going to need brave people. I think, sorry, this is great. You just walk back and forth. I swear to you, let me just say this, why he said I was being Pentecostal is true, because it worked perfectly all morning until 10:30. So, but murder hornets, yeah, where was I? That's my Mother's Day moment. Murder hornets. Thank you, Kate, for making this really big so it can be almost life size. It's honestly, if you stand in between it, I think it happens. But we're going to have to be brave. I'm going to start from there. And so what I was thinking is, hi, Mitch. You can see. Yeah, it just keeps switching off. I can't remember I remember what I'm going to talk about next, but I'm not going to memorize all the verses. So we're going to need that back so I can read it at least, or I'll go to my notes. But we've been talking about this idea of being brave. I'm hoping the murder hornet's still there, because that's a great picture to be stuck on. If they're stuck there the rest of the sermon, it'll be awesome. But unless you've got a really fear of bugs, and then I'm actually helping you. You're doing aversion therapy right now. But how do you get brave, other than if you're scared of bugs and you have to stare at a murder hornet the whole time? And so that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about how you could become brave, or at least a little braver. What would you do on the first day of becoming brave? And so this is what we learned from Gideon. Like, what happens when, Mitch, you're going to change it, and I'm going to go to my notes, because this is not going to work. We're going to make this work. All right. Because we're going to make this work this way. And now I got to switch back over to the other one. Can you switch it back there? All right. This is like watching an old man work on his iPad. This is working out great. You've seen this already. I think it was a press conference or something. Here we go. I'm going to bring my notes up, and you're going to switch it. So we're going to go to what would you do on the first day you're brave? That next slide. And we're going to start out just talking about what Gideon did, because Gideon had that very same thing happen. Gideon had to go from, he was a farmer, kind of a scared farmer from what we know. Gideon's a scared farmer, and he's out there by himself. And then all of a sudden, an angel comes, and we can read this from Judges 6:11. It says, Gideon, son of Joash, and we read this last week, was threshing wheat at the bottom of a winepress to hide the grain from the Midianites. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, Mighty hero, the Lord is with you. Sir, Gideon replied, if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? And where are all the miracles our ancestor told us about? Didn't they say the Lord brought us out of Egypt, but now the Lord has abandoned us and handed us over to the Midianites? And then I love this line, kind of why I'm so drawn to this story for all of us who are struggling with being afraid and trying to go, what would it take to become a braver person? The Lord said to him, go with the strength that you have and rescue Israel from the Midianites. I am sending you. Now, on one hand, it sounds like a big promotion. I mean, it sounds pretty exciting. But if you think about what the angel's saying is Gideon, it's up to you starting now. It's all of a sudden he went from just the guy in the field. You can switch the slide for me. It's just a guy in the field to all of a sudden it's up to you. You're going to have to change this. You're the one who's going to be responsible. And it's easy to think of Gideon sort of in, the idea of brave people we think of. Like when I think of brave, I don't know why, I think of Jocko. We have a slide of Jocko, and he's a Navy SEAL, and you might have you might know about him, or you might be a podcast follower of Jocko, and he's famous for sort of putting his wristwatch on Instagram every morning, and he gets after it at 4:30 or 4:34. Sometimes he sleeps into 4:36, but he has this statement. He always says that there's no such thing as a weekend. Every day is a Monday, which would be a lot of fun to hang out at Jocko's house. And he just seems like so sort of like, I don't know, like he was created in a lab somewhere. If you look at like even his face, like his face looks strong. Like if you gave me a free punch at Jocko, I'd be like, no thanks, I value my hands. Like, but that's not Gideon. If you switch the slide for him, like Gideon's first brave day was actually the very night that he talked to the angel. I mean, the very first day that he meets an angel, and I hope you read this at home. It's Judges 6, 7, and 8. Read it in the New Living Translation on a Bible app. And it's such an interesting story, and we're not going to cover all of it. What you missed between sort of last Sunday and this Sunday is that the angel talks to him, and then he says, well, how can I be sure, basically, you're from God? And then the angel does this crazy thing. He bring me lunch, and he brings him lunch, and he touches it like with his staff, and it just bursts into flame. And Gideon's like, I'm good. I believe you. You're from God. So that's what's happened. But all of a sudden, on the same day, God tells him, you're brave. You're a mighty hero. Gideon has to change everything. Gideon has to take action. So I want to, if you'll look up on the screen, Judges 6, 25 through 27. I want to read this, and we're going to talk about this part quite a bit today, because if you want to talk about a first day of being brave, or night, because it actually happens that night. Pretty interesting, I think. It says, that night the Lord said to Gideon, take the second bull from your father's herd, the one that is 7 years old, and pull down your father's altar to Baal and cut down the Asherah pole standing there beside it. Then build an altar to the Lord your God here on this hilltop sanctuary, laying the stones carefully. And sacrifice the bull as a burnt offering on the altar, using as fuel the wood of the Asherah pole you cut down. So Gideon took 10 of his servants, and he did as the Lord had commanded. But he did it at night, because he was afraid of the other members of the Lord's household, or of his father's household and the people of the town. So if you look at the first part, notice it says it's from his father's herd, and I've sort of highlighted that for you. It says it's from his father's herd, so I just don't want you to get the idea that God was telling him, like, go kill someone else's bull, because that's really not this story. And I find that it's important to say that and highlight that for you on the screen, because you might think, well, okay, God told me to go knock down someone else's idols. Like, I don't like the way they're living. I'm going to go take care of it. That's not what happened here. And the reason why I say that is not just because I don't want that to be true, but because it's not true. Gideon is the head of his household. That's why the angel came to Gideon. So he's the oldest male, or at least the chosen male of the household. So even though his father is alive, and we're going to meet his father in a little bit, Gideon is the bull that he sacrifices, the second bull, that's his. Because what would happen is the fathers, the family wouldn't wait until they died to pass on their farm, which you might be going, well, that's nice. Well, it comes with a few strings, because mom and dad and the others moved in with you, and they would all live together there on the farm, as Gideon was doing. And so when God tells him, hey, go take that bull from your father's herd, it belongs also to Gideon. It's now the family farm, so he's not sacrificing just his father's thing. It's his, so it's a big sacrifice on his part. And now we need to talk about sort of, I've actually got some pictures of Asherah and Baal. So let's do a little talk about Asherah and Baal. These were bad religions. I know that's a punk band, but these were Canaanite cults of that time that carried on, quite frankly, for hundreds of years. They were a big deal. Now, Baal is generally depicted as a bull, or half bull, half man. No bull jokes, but it's like he was the god of fire and war, and the fertility god, and brought crops. He was like your general sort of general purpose God of everything in that area at that time. And I know you might have kids in the room this morning, so I'll be gentle, but like worshiping Baal was not PG-13 at all. It involved sacrifice, even human sacrifice, ritual prostitution. It was a rough. I'm trying to be nice because I'm thinking like you have your 3-year-old sitting on your lap right now. I might go into more detail if we were here in the room, but it was not exactly the United Methodist Church. Let's just say that. And Asherah is she was depicted, and you see her. She's a lady. She's a lady, and she was both his mom and his lover, which is maybe the worst reference I've ever made in a Mother's Day sermon. Sorry, ladies, but that was Asherah, and often worshiped together. She was like the queen of heaven, and worshiping her was very disturbing. That's what I will say mostly about that. And so what God told Gideon to do is basically knock down the altar to Baal. It wouldn't have been the actual idol, but the altar that was built to Baal. And what the Asherah pole would have been is like there would be a tree right by the altar, which they would strip sort of all the limbs off and then carve a figure, or maybe a crude figure of a woman of Asherah into the pole, and they would worship, and they would also perform rituals, let's say there. It was a mess. So God goes to him and says, pull down your father's altar to Baal, and basically chop up Asherah and use her as the wood. So basically what God is doing here is taking the place that Gideon's family up to that point had been worshiping Baal, which was the god of the Canaanites, and Asherah also the god of the Canaanites. And remember, they were the newcomers. They're the people who, sometime before had sort of moved into the area, and God had told them to push out or defeat all of those enemies. They had not. And so what happened. What God suspected would happen, they'd sort of intermingled with the Canaanite people, and their gods had become their gods. And so they're involved in this sort of just like sick cult situation there. And so God's like, the first thing you do on your list, on your first day of being brave, is kill your father's bull, bring him in, knock down Baal's altar, and make a new altar to me with it, and then we'll use Asherah as firewood. And so that's what he did. So we should talk about, and I've got a slide for this, like, are idols real? Like, what did he do there? Like, by knocking down an altar to Baal, and by cutting down a tree. Now, obviously, to some people that were worshiping, they're like, oh my goodness, you've defiled the gods. You've knocked down the altar of Baal. And that's always sort of a sticky wicket that we deal with as people. I was thinking about this week. I have Buddha up there because when we first started at Fat Daddy's nightclub, we're already in a bar, and I'm like preaching underneath the core sign in a bar. But in the back, for some strange reason, and I really don't know, I know the owners, and they didn't even realize, it's just always been there. There was like a 6-foot statue of Buddha there. And I remember like people used to put Action Church hats on and stuff, which was sort of weird and uncomfortable. But I remember like having a conversation with another pastor that I admire. I said, so we're meeting in a bar. We're starting up in a bar, and, there's like the Coors Light lady behind me. It's already sort of interesting. Like, we've got go-go cages in our children's area, and we block them off and call them toy areas. We actually had a cigarette machine in the children's area, so don't send your kids with change. So, like, of all those things, we also have an idol. We have an actual Buddha in our church. Like, what should I do? I was kind of laughing, like, what do you do with that guy? And I just remember... he asked me a good question. He says, is it real? And I went, no, it's a fat statue. It's hilarious. And he's like, then treat it like a fat statue that's hilarious. And I thought, okay, that's so. As a Christian, as a follower of Christ, I don't think a pole is a god. I don't think a statue of a fat dude is a god, although I do like a statue of Dub's Big Boy, and that could become my god if in different circumstances. But so in a sense, really, God asked Gideon to do something that, he cut down a tree and he moved some stones. But I want to switch back to the verse again, because that was really not the point. What the angel said, it said, then build an altar to the Lord your God here on the hilltop sanctuary, laying the stones carefully. and sacrifice the bull as a burnt offering on the altar using as fuel the wood of the Asherah pole you cut down. So really what's happening here is it's more than just cutting down a tree and piling up some stones. See, because Baal was the Canaanites, the people of the land's explanation for how the world worked. See, Baal is their explanation of how the world began and how crops come and who brings the rain. And if you ask them any of the question, how did the world begin? Baal. Baal, I can tell you the story of how he did it. He conquered his father El, and he took his mother Asherah. I mean, it was a weird story, but that was their story, and they were sticking to it. And how does Asherah, bring fertility? Well, here's how it happened. And they would tell you a story, and I can't tell you because your kids would have to cover their ears. But they would say that's how the world works. This is how the world works. You want to know why we have crops? You want to know why we can eat dinner? You want to know why we have children and why our animals multiply? Well, it's because of Baal and it's because of Asherah, and that's just the way it is. But we know, and Gideon knew at that point, that's simply not true. That this was just a stick of wood and a pile of stones, and it was a lie. And so what God was really saying is, in place of these lies that are sort of you've emblemized by putting a stick of wood in your yard and a pile of stones, you're going to worship the true God. And it's going to cost you something. Like you're going to sacrifice a bull on that. And so step one, if you see on the screen, step one to becoming a brave person is destroy your idols. That's the first thing that God asked Gideon to do. Now, here's the interesting thing about that. The first step to becoming brave, and I want you to look at verse 27, and I've highlighted it because of that. It says, so Gideon took his 10 servants and did as the Lord had commanded, but he did it at night. And then you notice, why would he do it at night? It wasn't that he was like, I better get right on that. I can't wait till tomorrow morning. I'm going to do what God says. It's like, isn't it? It says because he was afraid. Gideon was afraid to do this, and so he kind of gathers his servants and goes, okay, guys, we're going to, double overtime, by the way. This is hazardous duty pay because I'm a little freaked out about this, but we're going to chop down old Asherah and we're going to make some firewood out of her. And we're going to move the altar of Baal and we're going to create a new altar to this new God that I now watch because he sent an angel and said I'm a mighty hero and burned up his lunch and I'm freaked out, but I believe. And so the whole point of starting to become brave, probably a lot like the thing that you and I experienced, that we often think like brave people, they're like Jocko, or they're some Navy SEAL who's never afraid. They don't feel like normal people. They don't fear anything. But I can't speak for Jocko, but I know for Gideon, he was afraid, just like you and I would be. And so here's the part. If you'll switch slides for me, here's the part for you to be brave. And here's kind of the good point about that we're still streaming. I can't wait till you're back here, and I'm excited for the future because I know eventually we will kill the murder hornets and you'll be able to come back here and we'll be able to sort of look at each other and, well, I won't see you much because of the lighting, but I'll see you a little bit and I'll be able to hear you laugh or kind of go, oh, Don, why would you say that? And I'll know, if I've said something terrible when you walk out the door and you sort of avert your eyes and walk past, but we don't have that today. But here's the good thing I realized, I never really thought about this, but you guys can talk amongst yourself. In fact, you've been doing it all month while I've been talking. So this is the point. This is the point in the sermon, in order for this to work, you're going to have to be brave. And you can talk amongst yourself and you can go, oh, I'm not sure about that. And here's the thing, I won't even hear you. You can go, he's wrong, or what is he thinking? But here's the thing I want to do. I want to show you a picture, and Mitch, you can put it up there. I want to show you a picture, and I want to tell you something. My guess is, this is the way you think of priests of Baal. You think of them sort of like a tribal shaman or a witch doctor or a medicine man. And see, we all have this sort of picture of history. When we read the Bible, we sort of think we get in our TARDIS and we go back as Doctor Who, not the weird new girl one, like the good one, David Tennant, the only good one. But like we go back in time and we're smarter than everybody and we still have an iPhone, so we're not really smarter, but we could look it up on Wikipedia. And so we go back. And we see the priests of Baal and the followers of Baal, they're sort of primitives. And it's not because you're racist, you're just arrogant, right? You're just arrogant because you think because we live in 2020 that we're so much better and we're so much smarter than these ignorant Canaanites. And so when we imagine the worship of Baal and we look at these guys, we've switched the picture, but it's probably more like these guys, like doctors and judges. And because here's the thing I want you to know. When I put that picture up, that's more what Gideon saw. And if you'll switch the slide again, what Gideon saw is that the priests of Baal were likely far more sophisticated and educated and wealthy than Gideon was. See, Gideon's a poor farmer. Gideon's an Israelite. He's a newcomer. His ancestors used to be slaves, and everybody knew it. And so the priests of Gideon, or the priests of Baal, and the priests of Asherah, and the followers, they were the sophisticated ones. See, you and I like to go back in time, and we think, oh, what savages. See, Baal, do you know what Baal would do? Like if, not Baal is a figment of their imagination, but Baal demands, the priest would say, Baal demands that if you want to be successful, and this is part of their worship, you would sacrifice your firstborn child. And see, when you think about the priests of Baal, like that first picture, like, oh, uneducated, unsophisticated, oh, I know so much more than them, I'm modern. You think, I would never do that. That's silly. It's offensive, but it's silly. But the second picture is more what Gideon saw. So here's what I want to, and this is, you're going to have to be brave. You're going to have to be brave to think about this. Think about this. If the medicine man said to your son or daughter, hey, they're with your boyfriend or girlfriend, and if you're going to be successful in life, Baal wants your firstborn child, and we're going to need to sacrifice it on the altar. That seems so outlandish and so silly, and you're just offended that that Gideon's family would even think about that. But I'm going to say something very offensive to you, but it's true. What if your son or daughter went with their boyfriend and they were pregnant, and the person was a doctor or someone at Planned Parenthood or a college administrator, and they said, in order to be successful, you're going to have to sacrifice your firstborn child. I'm sorry. That's just the way it is. See, here's the thing. You and I think we're so different than Gideon. And we think we're so different than people back then, but we have many of the same things. It's just the uniforms have changed. But there's all sorts of things that sophisticated, wealthy, educated people tell us that are opposite of what God says. They had temple prostitution. It was horrible. They would say to young men and young ladies, hey, if you want to be happy, you should mutilate yourself, and you should, become a prostitute and give your money to the temple. And if we think about them as savages, as medicine men and shaman and uneducated, tricksters, we go, oh, that's so silly. That's terrible, but that would never happen. But what if they went to a doctor and they said, if you're going to be happy, maybe you should mutilate yourself. Now, that's super uncomfortable. And sorry, moms, this is the worst Mother's Day thing ever. We'll get to that. But I don't think we're that different. And see, I want you to remember something, and this is super uncomfortable for me to say, but if you'll put it up on the screen, Mitch, Baal and Asherah worship was the accepted way of living. Like good, successful. The pillars of the community, they're Baal guys. Like the ladies who run the ladies' luncheon, they're Asherah ladies. I mean, that's just the way of the world in Gideon's time. And the reason why I'm telling all of this is not to offend you, but I just want you to know that Gideon was a lot like us in the fact that when he decided to follow the one true God, he was way out of the mainstream. And you and I like to think, oh, well, that's because he was more modern. No, it was because he was more backwards than the rest of their village. And here's another thing you should know about Baal and Asherah. Is that, and I got a slide for that, the priests of Baal and Asherah. Think about this. Like they demanded 100% acceptance. They demanded 100% acceptance. If what they would say, and I was reading about this and I'm like, oh, this is sort of a mark of something that's evil. What they would say is, if everybody doesn't worship Baal, then Baal will not protect us and cause our crops to grow. So we have to go out and make sure everybody worships Baal. And here's the thing about it, if you think about it, like the priests of Baal, you might go, oh, well, I still think they were backward. Oh, they were no dummies. Because if the crops didn't receive rain, they didn't go, sorry, we screwed up. They said, Baal is unhappy because some of you are not worshiping him enough. Somebody doesn't believe and someone didn't sacrifice enough, and they always put it on the people. And so that's the situation that Gideon found himself in. And so in Judges 6:28, it says this: early the next morning, as the people of the town began to stir, someone discovered that the altar of Baal had been broken down and the Asherah pole beside it had been cut down. And in their place, a new altar had been built. And on it were the remains of the bull that had been sacrificed. And the people said to each other, who did this? And after asking around and making a careful search, they learned that it was Gideon, the son of Joash. Bring out your son, the men of the town demanded of Joash. He must die for destroying the altar of Baal and for cutting down the Asherah pole. So there's kind of a good reason that Gideon was afraid. It's called Canaanite cancel culture. I can't say it, but and I know like it's a little more extreme than our cancel culture, but we're lazy. I just can't feel like that we would have the energy to go out and drag people from their homes. We would just cancel them online. It might come to that if we keep going. But here's the thing I was thinking, like, Gideon was wise to be afraid, wasn't he? And it wasn't because, oh, Baal's going to get me if I knock down his altar, or Asherah is going to get me if I turn it into firewood. Gideon was going up against an evil system. An evil system that stood against what? The truth of God. And it was a system where the priest said, hey, if everybody doesn't worship, we can't protect you, and Baal won't serve you. And so the reason why, and it's such a mark of something evil versus something good, like I want everyone to be a follower of Jesus. I want all of you to follow Jesus. But if no one does, like, I can look back and go, God that I worship is the God of Noah and the ark and the flood, where if only one family, and the God of, rescuing the people from Sodom and Gomorrah, because if even one family follows him, he'll rescue them. And it doesn't depend. If everyone doesn't agree with me, I look forward to heaven when I die. And so I don't have to make you love Jesus, and I don't have to make you follow Jesus. But guess what? In these false religions, like the Canaanite cancel culture, it's like everyone was like, if we don't kill Gideon, if we don't cancel Gideon, if we don't get rid of Gideon, my goodness, Baal could be angry because everybody has to do this or Baal won't. And so I want to just warn you, and I've got a slide for this, Mitch. It's like, being brave is going to get you in the best kind of trouble. And I say it's the best kind of trouble, but because it's the kind of trouble when all of a sudden, when you start, as Gideon did, trusting in the one true God. And if you think about it, he started at home. Like, we haven't even talked about, like, God came to Gideon and said, you are going to rescue your people. You're the one who's going to stop these invading armies. But first, I need you to do something at home. I need you to be brave. I need you to stop believing a lie, and I need you to I need you to make a stand. You're going to have to knock down some idols. You're going to have to knock down some falsehoods that you just accept because they're part of your culture. And the reason why I said you'd have to be brave is because you're a little annoyed with me that I'm making some sort of pointed insinuations. Woo, but I haven't even started, and I'm not going to. Because I was thinking, like, we could go through our houses and our I'm not talking about going room by room, clearing the house of idols, but we could sort of, all of us go, wow, that thing that I sort of just accept that, oh, I guess that's just the way things are. That's not what God said. And that thing that I sort of go, and I'm not, please understand, this is so, so important. This is not you going down to your neighbor's house and, ripping down their Trump sign. This is an idol and I'm no. This is, please stay in your home. I can't believe I'm saying that. There are murder hornets out there. You should be afraid. But this is about in our own homes, wherever you're at right now, going, what is it that I am believing because the priests of Baal, the way it is, the powers of this world, like they all say this, but God says the opposite. Well, here's something that I love, though. And I got to read you one more thing, and it's from Judges 6:31 and 32. When the people arrived to kill Gideon because they were angry what he'd done to the altar of Baal, his dad comes out, Joash, his dad, shouted at the mob and confronted him and said, "Why are you defending Baal? Will you argue his case? Whoever pleads his case will put to death by morning. If Baal is truly God, let him defend himself and destroy the one who broke down the altar." And from then on, Gideon was called Jerubbaal, which means let Baal defend himself because he broke down Baal's altar. Oh my goodness, I love this so much. What Gideon's dad said is, hey, yeah, I admit he did it, but why do you need to get involved? Baal's a big god. Baal's got those awesome Bailey bull horns. Let him come here. Let Asherah take a swing at my son if she's real. And so all of a sudden they took all the power. It was so wise, so wise. And we can do this in our homes too. We can take all the power away from these things that are idols when we just go, really? Does that work? What if I just don't do that? What's going to happen to me really? And that's what Gideon did. When he became brave, oh my goodness, it's so interesting. So becoming a brave person, step one for you and for me and for Gideon is break down some idols. Break down some idols that we've just come to sort of believe, like, oh, I guess that's just the way it is. Well, that's not what God said. That's not what a loving creator of the universe set up for this to be. And we don't go to our neighbor's house and we don't go to the town square and tear down their idols. But if we would start, can you imagine just starting going, no, that's not true. And I'm not going to do that. And it's interesting. People have the same sort of reaction, I think, today when I go, I'm a Christian. I'm not going to believe that. I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to buy into that system. I'm not going to do that. And it's weird because they get all sort of butthurt like the people of Gideon's time because they're like, you have to. We all have to believe it. We all have to. No, I don't. And I'll be just fine. Now, this is not just a Gideon. I got one more verse for you. 2 Corinthians 10:5. Paul said the same thing years later. Paul said, we destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God and take every thought captive to obey Christ. So if you're going to be brave, what Paul said is just like Gideon's, you have to knock down the idols. And he, in his time, even wasn't going, and then we go knock over the stones and then we build a new one. He's like, no. Jesus has come. We don't build altars anymore to God. But it's just the same. We knock down the falsehood and we go, this is what God said. And I'm actually going to take a stand and go, that's what it is. And yes, it's going to annoy some of the neighbors. But in the end, they're powerless to hurt me because I'm a follower of God. And so let me end with this. And it's a terrible Mother's Day sermon, I realize. And if you were waiting for me to save it, I gave up on that early in the week. I was like, there's just no saving this thing. It's not going to be a good Mother's Day sermon. We've got like idol worship, and like the dad is it's just not a good. And I understand that, and I'm sorry, but honestly, even if you were here, you know that I'm not good at that. But here's the thing: I do want to say, moms. Like I know many of you are brave. And in fact, man, I'll tell you. Maybe because I'm thinking of this, or maybe because this series is kind of looking for it, even though I've been thinking about it for 6 weeks or so, or more than that, maybe. This situation we're in as a world, it's becomes so clear. Like there are very brave people and there are very frightened people. And man, brave people, come in all shapes and sizes. But I think the bravest people I've seen this week, at least, are moms. Like, man, you do not want to get on the wrong side of like Mama Bear when she's thinking about her cubs. And so, moms, be brave. Be brave, and we thank you for that. And I'm so grateful to be married to a brave woman. But you want your kids to be brave too. And that's the scariest thing, right? Like, we need to be brave, and I think moms are so brave. I think about my mom, it's like it was weird because I think my mom had a lot of fear, but she raised a lot of brave kids, and I realized it's because she allowed us to be. Because I don't know what you're thinking, moms, but I know maybe your biggest fear is like, what if my kids get hurt, or what if they get in trouble? Well, that's so natural and so normal, but please, as brave as you are, you're also the future. And we need it so badly to raise kids that grow up to be brave and not just do what everyone else does and believe what everyone. And it's so dads, please model this. But moms, you have all the power here because not only can you model this, but you can allow this and foster this in your kids. And let me read one more thing to you. And it's sort of weird, and it's the thing you haven't heard. But this is the last verse of what we call the Star-Spangled Banner. You know that whole land of the free and home of the brave thing? Well, this whole follow God and knock down your idols and stop believing lies just because the sophisticated, educated people in, better uniforms than you believe them. But we don't sing this one, and honestly, I see why. It would be impossible to sing. But this verse, it doesn't sound like this whole following God and tearing down your idols and believing him is too far out of Francis's mind either. Because it says, praise the power that has made and preserved us a nation. And conquer we must when our cause it is just. And this be our motto, in God is our trust. And the star-spangled banner in triumph shall wave, or the land of the free and the home of the brave. Now, we've had a little 4th of July. A really bad Mother's Day sermon. And some of you are really uncomfortable with some things that I said. Be brave. Be brave. Do not, one, just believe it because I said it. Brave people like Gideon, they do things that shocked his neighbors. But it was just because he was believing what God said. And so I'm going to pray for you to have the strength to do that. And some of you are uncomfortable, not that I said something that maybe made you a little like, oh, I don't know if he should say that. Some of you are like, well, he should just tell me then what are idols in our world. Like, I've been thinking this week, like, I know some things even that I've kind of like, go, oh, yeah, that's right. And then you go, no, that's not right at all. But I also realize that that's what you have to do at your home. And that's what you've got to figure out. And so we'll talk, we'll pray. And next week, I can't wait to talk a little science, Gideon and science, because Gideon does something that you can't even imagine. Because Gideon is not a guy who just goes, okay, I'll just do the next thing without, if you're unsure or you like proof, Gideon's your man. But he was brave. So let me pray with you. Dear God, I'm so grateful for your power. And God, I'm grateful for your provision and care for our family and the families of Action Church and just for this church that we can still continue to do this. And God, I look forward to just a new day where we bring light to some very dark situations. And God, I know as a nation we have so many people that are afraid. And God, I don't even pray that we become fearless, because fearless is sort of cheap and often foolish. But God, I pray that we could become brave, that we could do difficult things that, as Gideon knew the outcome would be dangerous, but it was the right thing. And it was a thing that honored and obeyed you. And God, help us to be that kind of people. And God, we pray for our moms. God, there's just so many moms that we are so grateful to have that have been so brave and have cared for their families. And God, they're fierce. But God, we also know that it's difficult to raise brave kids and to allow kids to be brave. And God, I pray that we'd have both. We'd have moms who are fierce and strong, but also allow fierce and strong young men and young women to come out of their homes. God, we thank you so much for all that you've done for us. In your name we pray. Amen.
Staring out across the sea of sand, every second closer to the hunter's hand.